Hey everybody, it's Professor Snart checking in as we move from our Unit 4, looking at the yellow wallpaper, into our first group project, which you may not be used to as part of online courses, but I think they can work actually pretty well. And it's sort of like the capstone for the short fiction part of our Intro to Lit course. So I'll look at the group project in just a second, but it's Thursday morning when I'm recording this, so again, looking at our due dates, we have this Thursday, the Feb 15, and then a turnaround for Sunday, but you can also kind of get into this group project part. As I'm looking at this discussion board, right, for people who've posted the yellow wallpaper assignment, I see one post. So this would be an easier discussion, I think, to have face-to-face because we could kind of go back and forth a little bit. I also saw the same kind of thing happening in Unit 3 where there was very little work being posted prior to kind of right up against this due date and then the replies on this due date. So I get, for sure, because of the fact that we're working often like in our portfolio spaces, that you can be working on something and not necessarily post the thing until much later, but you've actually been working a longer time. I get it. The replies a little bit different because I see those time-stamped in Blackboard, and I don't generally make a habit of even caring about the timestamps, let alone using the analytics in Blackboard to see like who's clicked into what and when. It's a little too tedious and Big Brother-ish for me. But I'm going to kind of be honest here. I'm a little nervous about the time being spent on whatever work's being done. And I think from my perspective, I was really pretty lenient because we're early in the course in Unit 3. The nature of the assignment, right, using the web space to build a comparison was maybe a little bit different. Maybe people got steered a bit wrong with my the idea that we weren't trying to just do an essay on the web. It doesn't mean that we can just like back off and pull all the component pieces of an essay out and stick them up there just disjointedly. So I was pretty lenient for a variety of reasons in here, but I was a little nervous that the quality of the work reflected a fairly limited investment of time. And now I'm worried here, again, only because I'm seeing like on Thursday morning, one post. Maybe people have been doing tons of work up to this point, but do keep in mind that, you know, this is a 3-credit class, so if we were fully face-to-face, we'd be in class every week for 3 hours, and that's just class time. Forget about like quote-unquote homework or reading or anything like that. So even if it's just that 3 hours, which would be the absolute impossibly bare minimum, I have to ask, like, are you investing that much time in what we're doing? Are you giving it the room that it needs? Are you blocking out pieces of your schedule to actually do the work for our class? Because if I'm sensing that it's not going to happen, I'm not going to be as lenient as we move forward. Again, this would be good face-to-face because then we could sort of talk about like how the dynamic here, but yeah, just kind of doing things at the last minute and fragmenting them together and then sort of replying, even if it's positive, right, but it's just a couple lines that doesn't really get that deep. And again, it's not a blanket statement, but I'm a little bit nervous, right? So I'm kind of calling that out now so we can make sure that we're on the ball moving forward. Really, you know, I would say this regardless, but especially as we get into a group project where now you're depending on somebody else to pull their weight in a project that I don't just want to be like pieces cobbled together by individuals who worked like primarily individually, and then we just glom them together and it looks like this weird group project that really isn't a group project. Okay, so that's enough of the professor speak for now. So let's take a look at Unit 5 and we'll kind of walk through how our group project's going to work. Early term feedback, I think I talked about that before. If you haven't done that, take a quick couple minutes. Alrighty, so group project. Capstone of the short fiction section. We finish this and then we move on to poetry. I'm going to invite groups to work in a collaborative space, like Google Slides is a good option. Google Sites, which we're already kind of working in, are good options. Again, I don't expect people to be necessarily always meeting face-to-face. In fact, I know people aren't anywhere near campus, so this is going to have to happen virtually. And I don't expect people to be like emailing files back and forth. That's a kind of old-timey way of doing things. So work in one of these collaborative spaces where you can meet synchronously at the same time, even if you're at distance, right, from one another. Or you're communicating actively back and forth even if you're not necessarily in the same physical or virtual place at the same time. So the assignment itself, we call it multimodal, like things that we've done in the past where you're mixing text, image, audio, video. In other words, we're not just limited to text again. But I have to caution, based on some of the stuff that happened in Unit 3, it doesn't mean that this is supposed to be less work. It still has to be thoughtful use of these elements, and they have to be connected. You have to make this clear how it works for your reader, which is me, but also, you know, your other classmates here. So the fairly traditional prompt is just a comparative, you know, it's not an essay, but it's that kind of a prompt. We want to compare two stories in terms of a theme they share. We sort of did this before, right, comparing the characters, but now we're looking a little more globally at you know, full stories. So you really want to think about using the web to advantage, or using a slide deck to advantage. So if I have 10 slides in my slide deck, for example, is a whole cluster of 5 about one work, and then a whole cluster of 5 about the other work, really an effective way of organizing for a comparison. Same as if I was writing an essay. I wouldn't have as my thesis that these two stories share a lot in common, but then spend 5 of 10 pages talking just about one work, and then those last 5 talking about the other work. My reader would have like no sense of comparison, right? Because it feels way too separate. So you really have to think about creative and effective ways of even basic organization, regardless of what platform you're in. Then you obviously also have to think about content for each of those, either slides or pages within a website that you might build, right? We need to use the different elements and figure out how, like, where text is more appropriate, where a picture is more appropriate, or a video, where something that you record is maybe appropriate, and then analysis. That's maybe where things kind of got cut short in Unit 3, is that we might get a sentence kind of analyzing, quote unquote, but it's almost like then we just did the essay on the web, except we removed all the analysis and expected the reader to do that work. So we want to be careful not to do that again here. And then this one, again, is really important. Like I said, often will emerge in when I review like the revision history of a slide deck, for example. I see who's done what and when. Or if a project just seems totally disjointed from one half to the other. Almost like if you were delivering this as a presentation and one person was speaking, but then I asked a question of the other person, they're like, well, that's not really my part, so, and then you're fumbling for it. You really should have, as a group, a comprehensive sense of, you know, what you're doing across the whole thing. So basic assignment, really, the comparative approach across two stories. Remember, looking for similarities, not just differences. We already know they're different. But practicing the skill of working digitally, collaboratively together, and then in this form that, again, is not just pure text. Okay. Projects are due not at the end of this unit, but the end of next unit, which, again, gives us a little extra time to do some initial planning, just so that people can get connected with one another and figure out, are you on campus? Are there times that you can physically meet? Are you not? What's the mode of communication you're going to use, whether it's text, email? It doesn't matter to me as long as your group agrees. And then some initial planning just to get the ball rolling here in Unit 5. The capstone projects are worth 100 points, so not enormous necessarily in our course out of 1,000, but certainly significant, more than what we've done before. Okay, to get us rolling then, I have this planning document set up. You can all access it. We're all going to be in the same document. Pardon me. But here we have some initial questions to be thinking about. And again, not even about like what the content of the project you're taking on necessarily, but just some basic early brainstorming or facilitation kinds of things, right, for building this collaboration. Okay, let me find where we're at here. So, right, description, description, description. By the end of Unit 5, I need to see every group member having checked in and contributing here. And so you'll see that I've built the groups just randomly, and then I've reproduced all of the things that we really want to be thinking about early on in each of these grayed out text boxes. So if I'm either Alyssa or Grace or whatever group member we have, I'm going to come into the document, I'm going to find my spot in the box here, and then I might however you want to use it. You could start answering these questions. If I'm the first one in, I'll probably be like, hey, Grace, this is Alyssa. Get in touch with me by, and then whatever you want to do. This is only within our group, so if text is the way to go, you know, you can totally do that. If you prefer email, if there's some other new spacey thing that people are doing, do that. But as long as you agree. So again, you can see that our initial work here is just connecting people within the group and doing some initial maybe brainstorming or planning for a timeline, how you're going to work together, maybe if you prefer sites or slides or some other thing that you might be interested in, or whatever the case might be. And then everybody will find themselves in a group. So it's really, really important that, again, if I'm Alyssa or Grace, I pop in here, and if I, you know, make a note or add some stuff, that I identify myself having done that, right? So I as me, the professor, can see that each group member has at least checked in. If you haven't, if someone kind of flakes out or doesn't look like they're going to pull their weight, I'll reconfigure the groups. So we don't want to, you know, have a train wreck at the end of Unit 6 where we discover that, you know, communication is really not happening. Okay, so I think digital collaboration is a really, really important basic like education skill. It's a workplace skill or career skill. It's a professional skill. So it's something that takes a little doing in our context, but I think is really important. And I'm just going to jump into Unit 6 here to kind of show you how this wraps up. So this is where we'll be finishing things up, right? We'll see them linked as people post in the discussion board. These are some old ones that I'll delete from my previous class. So it's important to have this due date in mind as kind of the final end of this really 2-unit long project. So again, the project due date, right? Not this Thursday, but next Thursday. And again, you can visit the due dates. And then this reply component by Sunday. So Unit 5 is not a lot of work, honestly, relative to some of our other units, but it's really important just as a planning and kind of group connection time. If you have any questions, challenges, if we get a little deeper and your folks aren't checking in, by all means let me know and we can try to reconfigure things. I'll leave it at that for now, and again, just be sure you're devoting some time on task so I'm not seeing things come in at the last minute or work that has that sort of cobbled together at the last minute feel. All right, thanks everybody.